Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Laura Caruso. I'm the Executive Director of Pelham Together. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with Pelham Together, I wanted to take just a moment to share our mission, which is to support the physical, social, and mental well-being of all of our young people by offering as many opportunities for them to build resilience and a sense of connection and belonging. Our vision is really that every young person in Pelham knows that they matter and feels as if they belong as a member of this community. And tonight's event is part of our Parents Talk series, which is how we organize small and large group conversations with a variety of experts on a number of youth-related topics. And those topics come to us by parents and caregivers like yourselves who've made suggestions about real-world situations and challenges that they're looking for information, strategies, suggestions in an effort to support their own kids. So thank you for those of you who took the time to fill out the poll we put out in the fall, because it really does matter. This was the #1 most requested topic on that survey. And when you fill those quick surveys out, it really helps us ensure that the type of programming that we're rolling out and types of resources we're trying to find are directly connected to needs that you've identified. So thank you for doing that. Anne-Marie Garcia is our Director of Community Programs, and she's the real force behind tonight's event. And I'm going to turn it right over to her so she can get us going and get us talking with Dr. Camp.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. Welcome. As Laura said, my name is Anne-Marie. I'm the Director of Community Programs for Pelham Together, and I have 2 kids. I have a daughter who is 19 and a sophomore in college, and my son is 16, and he's a junior at the high school here in Pelham. We're really excited to have Dr. Cam here this evening to share her talk, Understanding Teen Social Struggles in the Digital Age and How Parents Can Help. And thank you to everyone who sent in questions. I did share them with Dr. Cam in advance, so she's going to weave answers to those questions into her talk. But any that she doesn't get to answer directly, we'll have a Q&A at the end. And if there's something you need explained in the moment, you can always put your, during the talk, a question in the chat or just raise your hand. As you saw, the event is being recorded, the talk's being recorded, so that will be sent out to all registrants along with a feedback survey, which I'll mention later, so be on the lookout for that. And now let me just share a little bit about Dr. Cam. So Dr. Cam Caswell, PhD, the teen translator, is an adolescent psychologist, parent coach, and the co-founder of the Thriving School Community, a revolutionary program established to improve student, educator, and parent well-being within the school system. As a TEDx speaker, host of the Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam podcast, author and private practitioner, she empowers parents and teens with the tools and knowledge they need to create positive, peaceful relationships with one another. She believes this is the key to changing the trajectory of mental health for generations to come. Dr. Cam speaks regularly at schools, national organizations, and conferences. After her presentation at New York Smith School for the Gifted, the coordinator described it as the best parent education event the school has ever had. She has also been featured as a parenting expert on TV, radio, podcasts, and in publications, including NPR, Newsweek, and Grown and Flown. Dr. Cam is the mom of a teen too, so she not only talks the talk, she walks the walk. Thank you for being here, Dr. Cam. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie and Laura. I really appreciate you guys inviting me here. And thank you all, parents. I know how busy it is and how hectic life can be. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time out today. And I hope to bring lots of value to you, answer questions. I want to encourage you to put questions in the chat or even raise your hands, because I like to tailor this to what you need. I did look at a lot of the questions. I believe I've answered most of them within this, but I know sometimes it's hard to listen and be able to put it towards what your particular situation is. So I am happy to help you with that. And I love questions. So with that said, I'm going to just get going. I'm going to share my screen right now. And as I said, this is Understanding Teen Social Struggles in the Digital Age and How We Can Help. Anne-Marie already explained who I am. I want to just share really quickly, why do I do this? Why teenagers, a lot of parents ask, a lot of people in general ask, like, are you crazy? Yes, first of all, I am. But when I was going to school for psychology, I was originally interested in preschoolers and teaching them about emotion. And I taught an adolescent psychology class and I loved it. And I had a lot of people in there that were actually parents of teenagers because I taught an evening class. And after every class, I'd have parents coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, what we are learning in your class is completely transforming our relationships with our own kids because we get them now. Why hasn't anybody told us this before?" And I just kept thinking that, and that kept playing in my head. Why don't people know this information? Because it changes everything. And so since then, I have just been on a mission to get this information to as many people as I can. I am now a mom of an 18-year-old, so I have lived through all of this. And I'm going to tell you, I live by the stuff I teach, and it works. It really does. So with that, let's get in here. And again, I'm going to encourage you guys to ask questions because my job's not done unless you guys walk away with tips and ideas and solutions that you can actually use. Let's talk about the new normal. And this one's really hard for us parents because we did not grow up in the world that our kids are growing up with. And I know that devices and smartphones and social media and the internet are terrifying as parents. It's the Wild West out there, and our kids are just always in there, and we don't know what they're doing. It's hard to know. This is actually 2021 data, so my guess is it's far higher than even this. 95% of teens have access to smartphones. At this time, 88% had their own. I can guarantee that's more. They are spending an average of almost 8 hours a day for entertainment purposes, right? And they all have access, a good portion of access to social media platforms. The biggest ones to this day are Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and I hear YouTube a lot too. And those are the ones that kids are on the most. And we don't always know what they're doing out there. And we hear a lot of scary stories, which I think also feeds our fear of how it's impacting our kids. And let's talk about how it's impacting our kids. There's a lot of research out there that's showing that there's a correlation between a lot of social media use and some of these cons, right? And I think we've heard of most of these, but I'm just going to go over a few of them. There's the isolation and the loneliness, right? Because we don't have that one-to-one contact. We don't have that real person, and you just don't have that same interaction. Now, a lot of this too has been magnified because of COVID. And if we have a lot of us with the kids that we have at our age, they were actually isolated and they only had social media and their devices to connect for years. And those were the years where they were developing the skills. They were learning how to interact socially. And that's how they learned. That's what they learned. And now we're putting them back into the real world. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of clients who are addressing and dealing with a lot of social anxiety, fears, school refusal. They don't know what to do. They're terrified because they don't know what that interaction is. They don't know how to look people in the eye, right? They don't know how to hold a conversation because they never had to develop that during the time that they were supposed to develop it, when that was usually when they would develop it. We also see a lot of cyberbullying. And this is something where bullying has always been an enormous issue. Someone's got their nice sound tone going, speaking of devices. But cyberbullying is a big issue, right? And you think about it, when we were growing up, bullying was always an issue, but it was maintained to the schoolyard and your neighborhood. Now bullying can, anybody from around the world can bully somebody, and it's 24/7. We can't escape it, right? So we've got that social comparison, the same thing. When we're kids and growing up, and let's face it, as adults too, we compare ourselves, don't we? We're always looking at it, and I hear adults saying, "Oh my gosh, everyone else has their lives together. All of their kids are respectful and doing well in school." And I'm like, says who? Well, says their feed. I'm like, yeah, speeds are not real reality, right? But we compare ourselves to that reality and we know better. So our kids are seeing this too. So there's always somebody that's going to be better than them at anything because we're going to find that. We now have more privacy concerns, right? We know that once something goes online, it's there forever. And this is hard for our kids to grasp. And so they put some scary stuff out there without knowing, right? So we've got those two. Exposure to inappropriate content. I know, and I've heard data on the exposure to porn, which just blows my mind all the time. But kids are seeing it, whether they have devices or not, they're seeing it because kids are showing it to them within their classrooms, on the bus, everywhere else. So we have to understand that no matter what we do within the house, kids have access to this through their friends, through school, through other means. So we need to be able to make sure that we're helping our kids have a healthy relationship. The final thing, and really the over-encompassing thing, is the mental health concerns. And how do we know our kids are struggling with their mental health? I think one of the things that actually is beneficial with COVID, if there's anything, is the fact that mental health became a topic that was more openly discussed. And the kind of the stigma around it, there's still stigma around it, but it's lowering a lot. And quite frankly, with the younger generation, there's a lot less stigma when it comes to mental health, and kids are much more educated about it, which opens up that conversation, but it also gives them information where they start self-diagnosing themselves, and they start worrying that, if they're sad, it's become depressed. If they're nervous, it's become anxiety. And now all of a sudden we have emotions that are very normal, everyday, healthy emotions that we are saying something's wrong with you for feeling this. And we have to learn to distinguish that too. So some of the things to look for to really understand if your kids are having these social struggles. And again, with teenagers, this is difficult because a lot of this happens just because they're teenagers too. So what I want you to do is think of, was there a time where there was a very huge change across multiple things for an extended period of time? Okay, because when we ask them, and there's tests where kids will say, there's like the depression tests that they'll take, and they'll say, have you been sad for 5 days in a row? Well, every teenager has been sad for 5 days or more, for at least 5 minutes, right? And that's what they're thinking. Yeah, I've been sad. So we need to look, is this constant, ongoing, and isn't getting in the way of their life and for them being able to do what they want to do? So one is the withdrawal or isolation. And this isn't just withdrawal from you, because a lot of teenagers and kids are going to withdraw from their parents for multiple reasons, and we're going to talk about that. But are they withdrawing from their friends? Are they withdrawing from people at school? Are they withdrawing from everyone that they used to feel comfortable around? Are there big changes in behavior? Not little ones. They're going to change. They're growing up. But are there really big changes in behavior, increased aggression, huge mood swings? Yes, they're going to have mood swings, but are they irritable all the time? Are they struggling to regulate their emotions all the time? Feelings of loneliness and rejection. You're going to hear these in some of the statements they say. You'll hear this very negative mindset, and they might start talking very negatively about themselves. The decline in academic performance. I see this a lot. Parents are really upset and concerned about this. For all good reasons, right? We see this decline. There's multiple things feeding into all of these, but these are just warning signs that something might be going on that we need to address. Lack of friendships. Again, I'm seeing this greater now than before COVID because kids haven't learned how to have the friendships in real life. Their friendships are now often online. And then school refusal, which often is because of one or more of these things that we've just listed. Here's the thing that I really want to state clearly, though. There are studies that correlate social media use and device use with these mental health struggles. It is not causation, though. There's correlation. The difference is we tend to think, oh my gosh, Social media is making them depressed. It's making them anxious. It's giving them social anxiety. But this isn't what we're saying. This isn't a we take the phone away and everything's better. What we're seeing is a correlation, which could often mean, which I see a lot too, is that because they are depressed, because they have social anxiety, because they are struggling in academics, they turn to their devices. So taking their devices away as the solution doesn't actually solve why they're turning to this. So we need to be able to discern what is what. This is not saying, oh, social media is great, just go use it. But we need to be very clear on getting under what's underlying these behaviors and not making the assumption that it is social media. And here's some reasons why. And again, this is about the new normal. And as parents, we need to understand this because this is central to their lives. This is part of what their world is. And so I've heard parents say, well, I grew up without a phone or social media and I'm fine. Yes, you did. And the phone did not exist, nor did social media. So nobody had it, right? So that's kind of one of the ways I'm saying it's kind of like our grandparents saying, well, I grew up without a car. You can. You know, it's life has changed. And so the world and their world is really tailored and centered around their devices. Whether we like it or not, it's not going away. So I want you to think about also what is the device bringing them that is actually positive? Because we need to embrace this as well if we're going to help them have a healthy relationship with it. So the first one that's really big is this is their go-to form of connection. Do I like that they're connected 24/7 to everyone? No, it's not great. But are they? Is everyone else in their, most of their friends? Yes, this is their world now. So when they don't have access to that and their friends are doing things, and I've seen kids who are very isolated and not able to have and maintain their friendships because so many of the friendships are maintained through the connection through their devices. This is how they text one another and email and send emojis and send gifts and do all kinds, right? So they're sending and connecting with one another through this. This is their form of communication. They also have these collaborative experiences. So things like gaming. Gaming is a very big way that kids socialize now. They get on there and there's people on there and they're talking to them and they're learning with them and they're having these experiences. And so some kids who are really socially awkward in the real world have these very robust, fulfilling relationships online. Is it the same? No. But can we dismiss it? No. We can't dismiss that either because that is very valuable to them. Creative expression. There's a lot of content creators out there. There's people, they find their entertainment that way. That's how they access a lot of information. They decompress. A lot of kids tell me that they come home from school. School's exhausting. Let's just be real about this. It is, they have to stay focused on things that are not interesting to them. They have to navigate the social waters of a school, which are really difficult to navigate. By the time they get home, they're usually pretty burnt, which is often why you get a shrug and a, how was school today? That's about all they can muster up. Not because they're don't care, but that's about all they can get. They need time to just do nothing. And often scrolling their phone, again, not saying it's the healthiest way, but that is the way that works for them. And so they'll tune to it. They also, and one of the things that I have learned a lot is they're able to find their tribe. And this is what I mean by that is there's a lot of kids that feel kind of outcast in the world. They don't feel like they really fit in with any particular group in their school, perhaps. And a lot of kids feel this way. When you go online, all of a sudden, there's no boundaries with geography and with time span and with everything. And you can find people that have the same really niche interests as you and can support you, and you can go and say, oh my gosh, I am not alone. I've got my people. This has been actually life-saving to several of my clients, where they feel like this is a place where I belong. Finally, education and support. So kids will go on there. If they're depressed, they'll go on there and they'll find support where other kids are supporting them. Or a lot of them, and this is where I see YouTube, I'll have kids that are like, I'm really into space. I love like all this cool stuff about space and missions and everything. And I'm like, wow, where do you learn about that? And they're like, YouTube. I'm constantly on YouTube channel learning about this stuff. And so they have something they're really passionate about, and they go and learn because that's their library, but it's a lot more exciting and a lot more accessible than it was for us. I had, and this will date me, I had the full World Book Encyclopedia. That's how I got to learn cool stuff, right? Woohoo! Now they got YouTube. I mean, it's amazing. So I want to just think about, let's balance this, because we need to help our teens and our kids learn to balance this, and we can't balance and help them balance it unless we are very open and accepting of the value it brings to their life and the necessity it brings to their life. Okay, so here's the goal. It's to help our teens develop healthy digital habits, balance, and reasonable boundaries with their devices. You guys with me on this one? Is this stuff that you want to do? Okay. Well, I actually, based on my time working with kids and families, my own experience with my daughter, and guess what? Trying to establish my own healthy habits with my phone, came up with 7 guidelines that I believe really work on helping us work with our kids. It removes those constant nagging battles, which, man, I think the number one thing I hear over and over again that causes ongoing battles is screen time. It is so frustrating. We set the limit. They don't want to follow the limit. We're constantly telling them to get off their phones. We turn off the Wi-Fi and they go ballistic. They're constantly telling us that their friends use it more. It is ongoing battle. And if anybody agrees with me, put a thumb up in the chat. I just want to see that you guys are here with me and that I'm on the right track with this. Anybody experience this with their kids? Okay. I'm not seeing anything, but I'm going to assume. Am I wrong? Anybody not experiencing this? All right. So the first guideline, and we really just covered this pretty much, but I need you guys there. Now I'm seeing some yeses. I really want to strengthen and to emphasize the importance of, we need to start here. We need to start with the point that accept how much it matters to them. Because when we put it off as the enemy and we say, that's the bad thing, you need to stop using this, this is to blame for everything that's bad and with you in the world, you know what? We're putting ourselves up toe to toe with their devices. And I'm going to tell you right now, they may love you, but you're not going to win. You're not. Because they love their devices a lot. And their devices are their connection again to their friends who they love a lot, and their world who they love a lot, and what kind of trends are going on in the world, right? So this is their way to connect and belong, which is the number one thing that our kids need, is to belong and be accepted. And a lot of kids, I'm going to be honest with you, they don't feel like they belong and are accepted at home right now when they become teenagers. Because suddenly they're doing a lot of stuff that you guys don't approve of. They're getting in trouble a lot. And I know our goal is to help steer them in the right direction, but they receive it as, you don't approve of me anymore. And now I'm going to go hide in my room, because otherwise I'm just going to get yelled at and probably get my phone taken away, which I really don't want to happen. So what we want to do, and the first thing, is to start understanding and learning from our kids what they do on their phone. Talking about it, not from a judgmental of like, what are you doing spending so much time on your phone? What are you, you're wasting your way. What are you doing wasting your, it's more of a, I notice you spend a lot of time on your phone when you get home. What are the things you enjoy doing on it? My daughter loves TikTok. We're constantly sharing TikToks. I've done a few embarrassing dances, by the way. But she's sharing TikTok trends with me and things like that. And so we talk about it and we share that. And it's my way to understand her world. And so now I'm getting, how do we really relate to them? Well, this is a great first start, is getting curious about what they're learning and doing online. All right. So then we want to understand the other next thing is we want to flip the script. And this is something that is really based in psychology. And I want you to think, kind of reflect back to the beginning of the pandemic. Did anybody go and hoard and stock up on toilet paper? Anyone? Did anyone buy more toilet paper than they have ever bought in their life? Did you need more toilet paper? No, but we were terrified that when we needed it, it would be gone. And guess what? I tried not to hoard. And when I went and needed it, it was gone. So we hoarded it. This is the mentality that we are creating with our kids' devices when we're constantly taking them away, when we're constantly focusing on restricting it and that it's bad and you can't use it then, and I'm turning off your Wi-Fi then. We are establishing a scarcity mindset. And when something might be taken away, or when something is always taken away, which means it's a good thing and without it is a bad thing, what does that make us want? More. That. Suddenly, this is the most desirable thing on the planet because clearly, now I get it. Parents take it away because they're like, this is what they value so much. So I'm going to take something that this is the biggest currency I can have. But the problem is, the more we do it, the more currency and the more value we give it. So we're feeding into their addiction by doing this. So here's what I recommend. And I know this is a little back and forth and crazy, but I'm going to tell you right now, my daughter's 18. I have never once taken her phone away ever, because I know it doesn't address what the real problem is. And I know that it adds to the addiction and the desire for it. I never have. Here's what I do encourage you to do, because I'm not saying by any means just let your kids go crazy with it, because they can't do that. These phones are built to be addictive. We know this. There's very smart people out there making sure that we can't put them down, adults included. So here's what I want you guys and challenge you guys to do. Rather than focusing on restrictions, the most amount of time they're allowed to, restricting, you can't have it this, you have to be away from it this. I want you to flip the script and focus on the minimum amount of time they get on their phone or their device. So this is after we've talked to them about what matters. We've talked to them about why they use their phone, what they need their phone for, the most important things, why I want to make sure that I'm connected with my friends, or I really love just chilling out and watching TikTok or YouTube. Then we're going to go, I hear you, and I get that you need that. I do this to chill out, or I do this to connect with my friends. Most of us use our phones still too. So we're going to make sure, what is the minimum amount of time you feel you need to be able to do that? Now, granted, our kids might say, well, I need eternity, all the time. Chances are they don't, though. Chances are when this is about setting reasonable and being an understanding, they start working with you and you go, okay, we're going to make sure and we're going to guarantee you've got that time. Now, when you guarantee that time, here's the trick and here's the tough part. We cannot threaten to take that time away as a punishment, because now it no longer has established that you are guaranteed this time. And we have now basically lied to them saying, we promise you'll have this time, but we don't. So now we're undermining. So don't do this unless you feel like I won't be tempted to use that as a punishment. But this is to help them set that mindset and change and flip that focus of, I can use my phone for this amount of time. Does that make sense? It's a very flip, but we're working with the psychology. It's a little of the reverse psychology going on there too. Because as soon as we talk restrictions, we're always going to want more. Okay, so another idea is I want you guys to think about what they do on their phone. So a lot of the questions I get is how much time should they spend on their phone? What's a right amount of time on their phone? Or they say, we're going to limit it to this much time. You got 2 hours. I've had parents that limit it to half an hour of time on your device. The problem with this is we're not considering what they're doing on it. We're making an assumption that everything that they do on their phone is invaluable and unproductive. And maybe in our world, it does seem invaluable and unproductive, but in their world, it might be some of the most valuable time that they have with their friends or with things that they enjoy and being able to learn. They also need it for school a lot, right? So what I really want you to do is when you're having these conversations about what you enjoy, really learning about what they're doing on it. What type of apps are they on? What are they looking at when they're on TikTok? What type of things? I was telling Anne Marie and Laura earlier, my daughter's like Miss Broadway. This kid loves following all of the Broadway stars on TikTok, and they go on live all the time behind the scenes, and she gets to ask them questions. She lives for that. It's the coolest thing. Man, I wish I had that growing up. It's the coolest thing. So she has this opportunity to learn and connect with the things that the thing she's most passionate about. So what are they doing on it, and what is the value it's bringing without assuming that it's always bad? Okay. So when we discuss what you're doing on it, I want you as parents to also think about what is it that I view as low quality. And I will say they've done studies, again, there's tons of studies out there, but they've done a study that shows that kids who are mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, and we can go and we can look at their feeds, and the algorithms are so good that if you look at their feeds with them, and I don't ever encourage spying behind their back, because that does not build trust, and that will break both ways. But if you go on with them and, have them show you stuff, you'll see their feeds, and their feeds will show you exactly what they're watching all the time. Now, if they're watching things that are constantly about, needing to get thinner or needing to bulk up or needing to do things, or things that you think are very problematic in terms of building their self-esteem or building down their self-esteem, and they're just scrolling through this day in, day out, yes, that definitely is an issue and will be very negative on their mental health. That is a problem. So if we see that, that's a whole nother conversation that we need to have. That, again, it's not about taking the phone away. It's about having discussion about why they're watching that and what they're watching, and helping them redo their algorithm to find more positive feeds. Because the thing, and we know this with algorithms, is once that algorithm gets there and that's all it shows, it feels like that's the whole world. Suddenly you think that everybody on the planet is this way. And so our world shrinks and our view gets very distorted. So that's something that we need to work with our kids and help them with and understand and rebuild that. Because there's a lot of positive stuff out there that we can retrain their algorithm to do as well. So we want to learn what they're doing on their phone. Kids who create, kids who are out there with their YouTube channels and doing silly TikToks, or maybe not so silly TikToks, and doing this type of stuff, they actually show that builds confidence. And what's really, we got to also understand is it's building an amazingly important skill for them in the real world. Because I know my daughter helps me with my social media that I have to do, which I hate and don't. She's constantly giving me insight, Mom, and she watches all my stuff. She likes all my stuff, and then she gives me feedback on it, right? This is a skill that people have to have. Understanding devices, knowing how to create content, knowing how to review content, that is an enormously big skill. So I want you guys to kind of think about all of this too. Another thing we can do is turn tech into an ally. Instead of fighting against it, think of it this way. Your kid is struggling to get up in the morning and is terrible at time management. Anybody have one of those? If you have a teenager, you probably do. Disorganized, loses everything, super disorganized, or has trouble regulating their emotions. There is an app for everything. Everything. So suddenly, rather than arguing with them all the time about getting ready on time, let's look at different apps that might be able to help them. I have one client that now has Outlook or one of those things and will invite their teen to a meeting so that they'll get a reminder about that meeting, which is basically, leaving for soccer practice. And it works great because they won't ignore the ding because they're trained to do it, right? So all of a sudden we're going, the things we're fighting them about, how do we teach them how to use this device as a useful tool rather than just scrolling through mindlessly, right? So how do we do that? And granted, there are so many amazing apps out there, and I was out there just looking. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's incredible ones for everything. So really helping them that there's things for mindset, there's things for meditation and coping skills. There's apps for everything that we can go together and say, let's go look for something that might help. And what's interesting is when kids do this, their world is much more digital than our world. I still like to write stuff with pen and paper and check it off. Like that's the way my mind works. Kids take notes on their phones all the time. They take all their notes on there. They put everything on there. And so they know how and can process information differently with that. So using that device to help them with the skills that they're struggling with is always an idea. Okay. Another thing I want you to consider is when we take the phone away, and I'm going to tell you right now, absolutely 100% yes, please. We need tech-free time. I know I'm talking about the pros of it because we have to accept that. But yes, we have to have time away from our phone. We do too. We got to do detoxes. So what I always encourage parents to do is find times within the day that are definite on times and definite off times. And the off times, dinner time, family time, homework time. These are times where the phones are not on. We're going to turn them off. One thing we need to make sure, and this goes back to the psychology of it though, because when we take the phone away right now, we often create a very negative experience. We're taking it away as a punishment. We're taking it away because it's distracting them from doing their homework. We're taking it away because we want them to do something that they don't want to do. And what are we doing now? We're now equating time away from their phone as bad. Time with good, time away. We don't want to do this. We want them to equate time off their phone as positive and good and awesome. So we've got to be aware that, and this is a big challenge for us. We know that the phone, what makes them addictive is the fact that they give us those dopamine bursts of dopamine that feel great on the brain. Our brain loves that. It's just every like, every ding, everything is just like shoot of dopamine, shoot of dopamine. Kids, more so than adults, crave that shot of dopamine. They also have a lower baseline, so they require more of it to feel good. So not only do they want it more, they need more of it, which is another reason why their phones are so easy and give it to them all the time, which also is part of the problem because now they know their brain's used to getting so much of it that they struggle to be bored. And we know this. Being bored is like painful torture to them because they're used to, it's an addiction, right? They're going into withdrawals with it. So what we want to do is we want to help them find things to do during that time off time where it becomes a positive experience. And I know one of the things that we struggle with our kids is finding time as a family. Finding this, because we're all so busy, just constantly busy. And I want to encourage you guys to find something. And some kids it's easy, some kids it's so impossibly hard that we're going to have to keep trying, but finding something that your child loves to do that gives them another sort of dopamine burst that you guys can do together. Being outside does this a lot. That feels great. Playing some games, playing like challenging games or any type of games. I've talked to kids who love playing. I'll say, what's the last time you really had fun with your family? And they're like, oh, we played games. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. How often do you play games? And they're like, well, mom and dad are too busy. We don't play. And I talked to mom and dad and they're like, well, we really want to do it, but they're, it's like we never can quite get our schedules to connect. The kids are busy when we're not, and we're busy when they aren't. And so we're trailing. So one of the things I really want to encourage you to do is finding something. If it's not dinner, if it's not game time, just finding something where the phone is off that we're enjoying one another. The biggest thing to remember when you're enjoying time together is we are not bringing up topics like school, chores, grades, tech, anything, because that suddenly goes, spending time with mom and dad stinks because we're talking about topics that are going to get me in trouble. And I hear this a lot from kids. The reason they don't hang out with mom and dad is because it is not fun to hang out with mom and dad. But most of them want to. So when we find something where we can do a challenge together, we can learn something together, we can do maybe they cook with you, or maybe even if, like, my daughter loves to go to the grocery store, she loves Trader Joe's. We go to Trader Joe's together, right? And she gets to show me and find the stuff on Trader Joe's TikTok that's really popular, and we go find it at Trader Joe's, right? So we're finding stuff, but now time away from phone is actually really fun, and I'm equating that, which helps me learn to balance it too. Because now I'm going, I don't have to be on my phone to be okay. And the sixth one, and this is a really, really difficult one, and this takes a lot of time, is we want to ultimately give them as much ownership as we can. Let's think of the long game. What do we want them to achieve in the long run? We want them to be able to make smart choices with their devices, to be able to control their device use, to be able to manage their devices, right? When we step in, as much as we do to control it, and I understand why we do, because it is addictive and because it's hard, but the more we do that without giving them and working with them on different techniques, and without giving them space to fail and figure it out, we now raise a child and an adult that still doesn't know how to regulate their emotions, or regulate their device. And I'm just going to share like my own story. My parents were this way with the TV. Okay. So TV was not allowed during the weekdays at all. It was highly restricted on the weekends, what we could watch. And we would go, I think one summer they got rid of our TV and we had no TV because it's better for our brain, right? It's better for us. We don't want to be doing it. This is what I learned. The second I left the house, I would watch TV from morning to night, nonstop. I had so much, I craved it so much that I became addicted to TV, and I had no ability. And I'm not saying but do you get the mentality of it? Like, it didn't teach me not to appreciate TV. It taught me to crave it and want it more and feel like I was left out. And the other thing I remember about it was I remember going to school and everyone was talking about what was on that night before. Everybody. And I was completely excluded from the conversation because I didn't watch it. My parents were doing exactly what I get why they did it, right? But the problem was, because of the way the culture was, it I couldn't fit into how what was popular in the culture then, and my need to belong as a teenager and be able to have those conversations, I wasn't able to have, and so there was this other kind of block for me feeling like I belonged. So I just really want to take this into consideration. This is, again, not about just giving free time, but we've got to learn how to help them use it and manage it in a productive way, but have to allow them to use it in a productive way. The final thing we want to do in the other one is that, and this, the talk, the listen, and the adjust. I do a podcast and I talk with experts twice a week about every single topic. And I'm going to tell you the one thing that is the same no matter what topic it is. And I did manners the other day. We did getting into college the other day. We do all kinds of topics. The number one thing we need to do is listen and understand what our kids are thinking and their perspective. As parents, I know we know better. I know we do because we've lived it, we've done it, we've been there. But what we don't know better is their experience and how it's impacting them. And so none of the thing that we share with them, none of the guidelines we set in place, none of the encouragement to take time off the phone or even the warnings of what not to do on their phone, none of that will be received if they don't feel like we have heard and understood them. So we have to start there always. And we have to empathize. So if your kids are frustrated because they came home and they say, everyone else has more screen time than I do, and I feel like you have a ton of screen time, we need to step back, and instead of saying, you have tons of screen time, what are you saying? I don't care what other parents say. They say, let me hear you. I hear that. I get it's frustrating to feel like everyone has more time than you do. It's tough. Let's talk about why that is. Let me understand what is that doing? How is that impacting you when you feel like everyone else is on? Let me understand. Man, when we step back and we start from that perspective, it changes everything. When we try to convince them that our perspective's right, we will never get anywhere. And I can guarantee some of you have tried. It doesn't work. I've tried it. It doesn't work, right? So we want to listen. We want to talk. We want to try different things. This does not mean it's always going to work. We're going to try stuff and it's going to fail, and we're going to give them ownership, and we're going to trust them to limit their phone, and they're not going to be able to. And rather than getting mad, we're going to go, okay, what got in your way? What was the obstacle of doing that? Let's talk about that and figure out another way to try it. We're not getting mad. We're on the same team trying to help them. The other thing we need to do with this, and I didn't even add this in here, but this goes across all of it, is we have to model. I talked to one parent who has gotten fights with her kid daily about phone use. And when we got talking, it turned out that she was on her phone 24/7, and her kids would sit there and go, but Mom, you're on the phone. And her argument was, well, I'm the adult. Man, do you want to make something even more desirable? Tell them that it's only good for adults. They want to be an adult, right? So now we're saying you can't do this, but I can. And that now has discredited everything about it's not good for you. Then why are you doing it? We got to manage it. Well, what? So we need to make sure that whatever boundaries we're setting for our kids, we're turning it off at night. We're not using it at dinner time. We're not either, because that's what really teaches them. And if we're telling them they have to do one thing and we're doing something different, that discredits everything we're saying. It just does. That's a hard one for me, because I love my phone. And I had to take TikTok off because I was scrolling too much. Let's just be real. Okay. Bonus tip. And here's one of the tips I want to give you guys across the board when it comes to peer pressure, when it comes to bullying, when it comes to being anything, is I want us to be open to allowing our kids to say no at home. When our kids are allowed to state an opposing view to us, to disagree with us, to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Here's what we're doing. We're giving them the self-worth and the value and the ability to advocate for themselves. And we're saying that your no has value and matters. And what's really hard about this is, as parents, we often will hear their no as disrespect or their no as defiance. And I want to help you change that, because yes, the way they say it may feel very disrespectful, and it may be very disrespectful the way they say it. We want to separate how they say it with what they're saying. Because in this world where there are people out there that are going to be trying to push them to do big, scary stuff, there's adults out there pushing them to do scary stuff, to do things outside their comfort zone. And if they don't feel like they're allowed to say no at home, they're not going to know how to say no outside. And I'm going to share one just horrifying quick story, though. I had a client who was assaulted, and we talked about it. It was devastating to her, and we were talking about it, and she was explicit about what went on. And the whole time when she was talking about it, they kept asking her, well, when did you say no? Did you say no? And the stuff that he was her age, the stuff he did was absolutely not okay. But she never once said no, because she was never once allowed to say no at home without getting in trouble. And she told me flat out, I didn't know I could. That's terrifying to me. So we want to make sure that our kids are able to do that. And this, again, research has shown when kids are allowed to argue and say no, and we teach them how to do it appropriately, they have much more conviction against peer pressure. They're more able to protect themselves against bullying. They're more able to know when or what not to put online, because they don't feel pressured to put inappropriate things online. They know when they see something inappropriate online to turn away from it. This gives them that power. Okay. So I want to just ask, and then we're going to be done. Think about it and just put in the chat if you want. What is one thing about this? And then we're going to go directly to ask questions. What is one thing that stuck with you guys, or that you're going to go, hey, I'm going to go try that and see if that works? Anything? Yeah, model the behavior. 100%. It is so hard to do, man. Tell you, my daughter's a great reflection on all the stuff I do bad. All my bad habits. I see completely. Yes, asking them. That's a big one. What do they like on their phone? And this is such a great conversation starter too, because it gets you to understand, gives you something to talk about that they love. Have them teach you something on the phone. Have them teach you how to play a game, or teach you how to do an Instagram reel, or teach you how to do something like that. They love being able to teach you. Yeah, how much time they need. Absolutely. That's a big one, because now we're going to get their perspective. And now we're also working with them. Oh, Alex, can I tell you, Pokemon Go, man, I did that with my daughter, and we went and because I was like, we're going to go out and we're going to use this to exercise, and this is going to be great. She took it off her phone probably a year before I did. And I was still like constantly out there, like collecting balls. I'm like, okay, this is not a problem. This is no longer bonding with my child. This is me needing to do Pokemon Go. It's pretty bad. Clearly I have those. Except that it matters. Yeah, those are big. Okay, so one thing I wanted, all of these things, I created a little printable. If you want the printable, you can go ahead and just screenshot it, but I've got all of these written out. If you think these would be useful or want to go back and kind of review them and just try different things, I'll leave that on for a second. And then I'm going to hand it back to you, Anne Marie. And do we want to, I can go through the questions that were asked, or we can go through and see if anybody right now has a question they want to ask first.
Let's start with seeing if anyone has a question first. I took a look at the questions. I circled the ones that I think maybe we can ask you, and I checked off the ones that I think you might have covered. But let's start with,
Sure.
does anyone have any questions? You can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask your question. All right.
I
So,
have a question, Anne Marie.
oh, go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
Hi everyone. So how often would you suggest to reevaluate? So we have two kids at home. One does not have a phone yet, and the other one is showing addictive behavior, like we all do with our phone at home. And so I feel like we kind of need to have a family meeting where also the one without the phone has a right to say, I want you all to be off. How often would you say to reevaluate the status quo?
I think I think a lot of this, that's a really good question. And when I get a lot, I think what's important is focusing on first, what is something, a behavior, and you were saying one of them has the addictive behavior, right? So one of the things I would focus on first and pick the one thing, first of all, just focus on one thing at a time, right? So we're not trying to fix everything. So if you're like, I want to limit their time, let's focus on figuring out what solutions we can try to limit the time. So we may go, okay, we want to give them ownership, but we also know it's hard. So we need to set boundaries. So let's establish it and maybe try it for a week and see what happens. Give them room to fail, give them room to try to regain their footing, try to figure it out and try it. And after a week, you can say, okay, this seemed to really work, but I noticed this was still a struggle. What was getting in your way then? Because now we want to do it frequently at this point when we're trying to build that new skill, right? So we need enough time where we're going to give them time to practice, time to fail, time to retry it, but not too much time where they're going down the wrong path, right? And now we're going to reset and level set and go, okay, what worked, what didn't? Let's try this again. Again, it's not about punishment or anger. This is about setting a healthy habit. How do we work together on this? When that healthy habit has been established and it feels like things are going well, then I would let it status quo until maybe they start pushing back about something or asking about something else. And then you're like, okay, now we want to slowly start building this new skill out and trying that. So there's things where, like wanting kids wanting social media. And this is a scary thing for parents. And the age, this is so all over because it really depends on your child's maturity. It depends on what their needs are. It depends on a lot of things. But I would always encourage that, again, is something where, okay, with social media, we might check in daily with that at first because there's a lot that they haven't learned. And it's like, you know what, we're going to let you have it, or maybe we're going to have it on my phone first, or we're going to let you have it, but only we're going to do daily check-ins now to make sure that you're comfortable using it and answer any questions. And then once that goes, and then we can start backing up. So it's kind of like training wheels. We're going to wean them. We're going to give them the benefit of doubt and let them learn it, but we're going to slowly try to back off as they learn it. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. So it's
Okay.
like a living thing. You have to maintain
Always.
it. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they might be fine at something, and then all of a sudden you see that a behavior starts sneaking back again. And then it's getting curious. Like I always like the notice. I notice that you've been spending a lot more time on your phone than you used to. What's going on?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, why don't I go ahead and read some of the ones
Sure.
that I think are still left here.
Yes.
So I'm gonna start with social media. How do you keep kids safe when they have a phone and they have access to social media?
This is a great one, again, kind of doing what I was just saying, where we're gonna phase it in. We're gonna do training wheels, right? So I think this, first of all, is being educated yourself about the settings, the privacy settings. There's like Instagram has these great settings where you can go in and it's like I'm trying to remember what it's even called, but you can go in and you can like, I need to go check what it is, but you can go in and you can set it so that you get information about what they're doing online. So when they're first going on, you're going to set some training rails and some guidelines and say, okay, you can use it, but we're only going to use it maybe for this amount of time, or we're going to review what you're doing on it just to make sure. We're going to go look at the privacy settings and we're going to set it to make sure it's a private account. We're going to go look at the type, look at the type of feed and type of content. We'll talk about the type of content that you're seeing on there and what you can get, right? So it's about that education. Maybe we go on Instagram together, right? And we're going to go, let's go look back and forth and we're going to share, find things that we see. So we're kind of going in there and we're learning it together. Then as they start understanding it, we're going to start backing off a little bit, right? We don't want to constantly be monitoring and in there all the time, because our kids need to learn how to do it on their own. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, and you probably already know this. When we become too over the top focused, reviewing everything they do, this does not teach our kids to be responsible. It teaches them to be sneaky. So I've seen this, and I'm sure you guys have heard of like Finstagram, Finsta, where kids will have like 3 or 4 layers of Instagram, with the one that you and grandma get to see, the one where their schoolmates get to see, the one where most of their friends get to see, and the one where like them and their best friend sees, right? So there's these levels. So when we think we're being really tight and restrictive and really honing in on it, but not educating them and not opening it up and not listening and not giving them room to fail, they're going to get sneaky. And that's when it gets really scary, because we don't know what they're doing on there. And they can a lot of times they'll justify doing some scary stuff on there.
Great. You may have touched on this a bit, but what is the right age for the first smartwatch or phone?
This is a tough one, because it's really dependent on the maturity of your child, what your child needs it for, what your family does with it. So you can also get it and start with just very few access to very few things and slowly get it up. I know I first got my daughter just like the very basic watch where you could like text people. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but I remember doing that because I had dropped her off at something. She had run in, it was at the school, dropped her off, went home, came back to pick her up. It had been canceled and there was no way for her to contact me. And I'm like, that's it. We're going right now. We're getting you something where you can contact me. Like, I was like, there's no way that's happening again. So that was really, we kind of started with that and we kind of built up to what she could do. So again, I don't think there's a right age or wrong age. I definitely would put off social media for as long as you can, but I also would truly listen and understand if all of your kids' friends are connecting through texting or a social app. Pay attention to that, because we don't want to create more barriers for them to connect. We want to teach them how to do it in a healthy way. So I really want to encourage you to listen to that, because their world is different than ours.
Okay. How do you feel about cell phone bans in high schools?
Within the school itself? Oh, I would love that. That would be amazing. Because it's distracting and it's hard to control. It's very difficult. I think what's hard, and honestly, a lot of parents don't like that, because we contact our kids that way, which I have done. But frankly, the more we don't have access to the phones, where all of them don't equally, is nice. My daughter went on a weekend retreat and they took the phones from them at the beginning of the weekend and they didn't have it all week. And I thought that was going to be horrible. And she said it was amazing. She loved it because no one had them. So there wasn't this, sense of FOMO.
Yeah.
Nice.
My son had a similar experience. He goes to a camp where they take the phones away for the 6 weeks, and
It's amazing.
they're great. They're great.
Yeah.
Okay, so now a couple of questions about online bullying.
Yes.
How do you suggest handling seeing friends' kids behaving meanly over text or social media? Do you stay out of it or share this with the parent or your friend?
This is a really tough one because I have seen where the bottom line again is we need to talk to our kids. We need to be involved with our kids because we want to build trust. So the first thing I would do and is allow your kids to have this if they're the ones that are being bullied or the ones that's recognizing it or they're the ones doing the bullying, we want to have an open conversation and understand what's going on without the judgment. The reason we want to do that is because the influence that we will have is through that trust and that respect. And if we immediately judge them and get mad at them for it without understanding, they're going to shut down and we're not going to really get to the root of why they're doing it or whether they even understand why it's not okay. We also have those kids that are doing it because they want to belong and other kids are doing it too. And so, right. So there's a lot of reasons why they're doing it and we need to get to the root of that. The other thing is I want to make sure that they're part of the solution. And I've seen where kids have trusted their parents and told them about it, begged them, please don't say anything. The parents have gone and said something anyway. And the kids are like, I will never tell my parent anything ever again. And I understood why the parents did it because they were worried, but we got to do it with the kids. If we want to build that trust, we also want them to be part of the solution because we are training and teaching them how to handle a situation like that. So we've got to talk about it and say be very open and be open about how it's feeling, why they're doing it, what that experience is, and then also be honest with what our concerns are about it. And then look at options of what can we do to stop this.
Okay. Along these same lines, what role do you think schools play or should play in helping students when they're being bullied online?
This is so difficult, and this is just bullying in general. I've seen a lot of schools that I wish I had a really good answer for this. And I've seen a lot of schools try to figure this out. And I think it's an extremely challenging thing because a lot of schools say they have zero tolerance. But I see a lot of bullying going on in zero tolerance schools. And I've also seen where the kids who are bullied end up being victimized again by the schools because they get called out for it, they get stigmatized for it. I've had people where they get followed by somebody to protect them, which makes them even more of a target. So I think this is it's a really difficult thing to get schools involved because schools also have to cover their backs. There's a lot of people that will get angry and sue, and they need to, there's just so many different pieces. What I would encourage parents to do is to work with the school in doing it. So rather than saying, school, you've got to figure this out, it's a school, this is what's going on. What can I do? What can we do together? How can I work with you and be very open to that? Because when we go in there upset that the school's not doing enough and the school feels like they're being attacked or worried about what the parents are saying, we're no longer resolving the issue. So we want to go in there going, I get this is hard. I want to protect my child. What can we do together?
Okay, just a few more.
Yep.
Is fifth grade the new teenager?
I mean, second grade could be the new teenager. I think one of the things that we are seeing that's hard, and we've always seen this, but because of social media there's so much access to information that kids know a lot more than they did before, which influences them. The scary part is the brain development is not any different than it's ever been. So now they've got all this information and access to things that their brain doesn't know how to quite process, right? But we also see that emotion regulation is kind of out there too, because there's a lot of stress. So I don't know if it's the new teenager, just always has been, But, yeah, we're dealing with a lot of this in 5th grade.
Right. Okay. How do you encourage siblings to play well together?
I wish I knew. First of all, let's just state the fact that sibling rivalry is a thing because whether we like it or not, siblings are vying for the same resources. They're vying for space in the house. They're vying for parents' attentions. They're vying for everything. If you get more, I get less. So we've got that, first of all, and that's a really difficult thing. We also, without knowing it, often end up comparing our kids to one another, even though we try not to. It's like, well, so and so was able to do it. Well, and it's hard. And even like, well, we're going to go do, so and so's in ice skating. So we're going to do this all this time. And the other kid's not in anything and they feel left out. So we've just got to be very, very aware that everyone always feels like they're the one with the short end of the stick. You never feel like you're the one with the fair share of it, right? This is again about listening, about empathizing, about understanding, and not trying to say that's not true. I treat you fairly. Don't do that, because that's not their experience. Instead, go, let me understand your experience. I'm sorry you feel that way. We're trying to, this is how we're balancing it out. What can we do to make you feel like you're feeling more, having more time, right? So we want to look at that first of all, but we're going to have it. We're going to have that because let's talk about comparisons. They're constantly comparing themselves to each other too, right? So the only thing I encourage is, how do you as a family do more things together where you're kind of, again, you're enjoying one another? How do you create things where they're maybe doing something together where they're not both against one another, but doing it together? I always love doing things where you're like, and this, some kids may roll their eyes. I know my daughter loves doing this, but things where you're like volunteering and baking cookies to take to the police officers, or you're doing some sort of, pay it forward acts of kindness, or you're doing something like this where that in itself builds up your self-esteem and your motivation and feels really good. And then you kind of bond with the person that you're doing that with. So there's always those opportunities as well. The final one is, allow them to have their own space and be separate. And that's okay. Don't try to force them together. Eventually they'll come back together, but if they really don't want it, it's okay.
Okay, awesome. And then the last one from our list is, how do you encourage chores without pushback? And what are your thoughts on allowance as motivation?
Okay, so chores is one that I love talking about. And here we're gonna go back to the basic psychology of it that we did with the phones. The one biggest mistake I see parents making with chores is that we again make it a negative experience. Chores become something that we have to do. We bring it up right when we're about to do something fun. You can't do something fun until you do your chores. We're going to punish you by making you do more chores. Chores is something that we're nagging you about. Suddenly, chores is this really negative thing. And let's step back. What is the purpose of chores? It's to encourage and teach our kids to be responsible, to want to participate, to be part of the family. And now we're saying participation and helping stinks. So we're not encouraging the behavior we want. We're making that behavior something that they will dread and try to stay away from. So what I always do is I make that experience something positive. We do them together. I share, like, I don't know why the dishwasher's not that big of a deal, but I don't like unloading the dishwasher. Either does my daughter. We do it together. She gets the top, I do the bottom. We talk, we do it. It's done. Okay, thank you. That sucked, but yet it was time to connect, right? I don't ask my child to do something that I dread doing because I don't want to do it either. So I'm not going to pawn off the stuff I don't like on her or make her, right? So finding the things that she does well and enjoys doing. The other thing is, when they do the chore, not to get super picky about how they do it, but be thankful that they did it because they're doing it for you. They don't care. They don't care if their shoes are picked up. They don't care if the dishes are clean. That's you that cares. So they're doing it for you. And if you go in there and say, you didn't do this well, this wasn't good enough, do it again. well, who's going to do a chore again? Instead, go, thank you. And like I always say with my daughter, like my daughter washes her dishes. She does not do dishes to the level that I would like to do dishes at all. I appreciate that she does the first round, right? She does take one and I go do take two and thank you, right? So we get there and we're kind of doing that, but she also helps out all the time without push occasionally. The final one is occasionally she would push us back. And when she does, I say, okay, I've got it. She's allowed to say no. And usually she doesn't. Those are the things. Just think about what is our long-term plan and are we really building that mentality with the way we're doing it?
Got it. I lied. There's one more. I'm seeing it on the list here. This is the last one from here. When people say pick your battles, what sorts of things should be non-negotiable other than the obvious safety related ones?
This is up to you. And this is what I always encourage parents to do. Really think about this because I don't think we sit down and think about this, particularly as a couple. If you've got, and a lot of parents are on two separate sides of the spectrum when it comes to parenting style, I see a lot. I want you guys to sit down and really think about what are the main things that we want to teach our kids. What are the main values or characteristics? For example, kindness is my number one. I want to teach kindness over respect because if you're kind, you're genuinely respectful too, right? So I want to teach kindness. So now I'm focused on what are the things that I'm going to prioritize. And the reason I want you guys to do this is because I want to make sure that we're not fighting about things that don't really matter. Because if we're constantly fighting about every little thing, then it's a negative environment for everybody. Nobody wants that. It's not fun. It's not fun for anybody. Nobody's learning it. Really dig down into what are the key main things. No more than 5 values, no more than 3 things that you're trying to address, behaviors you're trying to address. And I wouldn't even do that many at one time. And focus on that and set those guidelines and only focus on that for now so that your kids aren't going, no matter what I do, I get in trouble. I don't know what they want. I give up. I hear all of that all the time. So now we're focusing. Then when we know kindness, respect, honesty, whatever it is, accountability, whatever it is that you want to build in your kids, let's go back to modeling. Is every interaction I have with my child modeling that behavior in my interaction with them? Am I kind to them? Am I respectful to them? When I'm talking about other people, am I kind and respectful to them? When me and my spouse are talking, are we kind and respectful to one another? So now I'm going, kindness is really important. And kindness is a thing that I can't tell them to be kind if I'm a jerk to them, right? Now that makes no sense. So we're kind to them and we're going to talk about that. And if they do something that's unkind and they know kindness is something that we talk about as a family as being important, then we try to understand what was your thought process in that? Because from my perspective, it didn't feel like that was kind. Did it to you? And now we're just trying to get curious and understanding, right? I'm a big person, a big proponent of this positive, and I know people are like, bleh, but positive reinforcement is so much more impactful than punishment. Punishment just shames them for doing something that they are, for some mistake they've already made without setting them up to succeed moving forward. Positive reinforcement says that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, you know what I'm saying. You know you can do it. It feels good to do it, and you're going to do more of it because of that. That's what works. And it is so powerful, and it creates much more positive environment in the household. It creates more connection and trust and respect between each other, and it builds up their self-esteem and competence.
Great. Thank you. Let's see what we have. A few things in the chat. Let me see. My chat go. Oh,
Okay.
Hold on. There we go. Laura put some resources in. The Center for Humane Technology website has some great resources to help kids establish balance, including resetting the algorithm so they clean up their feed.
Love that. That's fantastic. I'm going to go get that. That's cool. Yeah, the
And
algorithm is really, really key because that is
Yeah.
how they view the world.
And then Alex says thank you. She really
Thank
appreciates
you,
it.
Alex.
Any other questions? Just feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
Hi, good evening. I have a question.
Sure.
I was just listening because, I'm from the generation that just mentioned about that I didn't have phone, I didn't have a tablet. So, and now having a 13 years old daughter in teenage time. So to me, seeing her spending her weekend instead of going, going to ride a bike with her friends, and she said she just prefers staying at house with her phone, with her tablet. So this is going to be the normal now.
Well, and this is what I'm saying. So yes and no, right? We definitely want balance. And I think what we need to do is understand that their childhood isn't our childhood, right? I'm going to guarantee if we had that, I would have been on it all the time too. And my mom would have been yelling at me all the time for being on it, right? But yes, we do still want them outside. We do want them having friendships that are personal. That all of that is so critically important to their development. This is about helping them find balance. So it's not saying no to this, it's saying yes to this, but let's find this too. And it's making this other option desirable and interesting and not punishment or forcing them to do it. Because when we do that, we're only feeding into that mindset. So Ariel, I 100% want my kid out there playing on the bikes and playing outside and going hiking and being in the fresh air and having friendships that are face to face, 100%. So this is about understanding that's their world. How do we help them balance it in a healthy way? Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Well, Dr. Camp, thank you so much. This was so helpful. And just to let everyone know, as I said in the beginning, this is being recorded, so we will send out the link to the recording. There's also, in that email, you'll see a survey. So we always love feedback. So please, it'll take probably just a minute. So if you could fill that out for us and let us know your thoughts. And as Laura mentioned in the beginning, we really listen to the community. It's how we bring these programs to you. So if there are topics that you'd like to see us find speakers on, please let us know, and we'll do that. With that, again, Dr. Kim, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.